Hey everybody, it's me. You won't recognize me. Yeah, it's 9, and I was outside playing 9 innings of golf, minus 18. And if you live in the part of the world that I do, and you happen to be playing golf, and the foot dragging zombies manage to get through the nut deep snow and try and eat your brain, you might have trouble getting this out and using it wearing this. You might opt for something a little more traditional, like this, tools of cultures in northern climates. It's okay, you still got to train. Hello everybody, it's me again. And it's another dry training session, episode 6. First thing I want to say is we're going to go over the 4 universal firearm safety rules as always. Rule number 1 is treat all firearms as if they're loaded at all times. Rule number 2 is never point the firearm at anything you do not wish to kill or destroy, except at yourself during a visual bore exam in the steps of prove. Rule number 3, keep your finger off the trigger and out of the trigger guard until your sights are on the target that you've positively identified and you've made a choice, you've made a conscious choice to discharge the firearm. And rule number 4, know your target and beyond and all around it, everything behind it, under it, and over it. You cannot operate a firearm safely with tunnel vision. Now, before I start my dry training session, I usually get my handy dandy custom military grade day planner out so I can keep notes. Yep. You don't have to have the high speed low drag ones that my mom got me when I went to kindergarten, but you can get just a standard notebook and a pencil sharpener. And if you're having trouble remembering the 4 universal firearm safety rules, write them down before you start your training session from memory. You'll get it right sooner or later. Now, today's episode, I want to talk about the holster. As you caught in the intro there, we want to talk about building the holster draw, the mechanics of it. I want you to understand how to train with what you own. It is not specific to any one type of firearm, but I choose to do it in a way that covers all the bases for whatever it is that you happen to own or were able to purchase before you got locked out of the system by the lords and powers that be. So it doesn't matter if the holster you bought is a flap style holster like this, a strap style holster like this, a snap style holster, or a button style holster. It doesn't matter. The steps are all the same. I'll break them down so it applies to all of you. Understand this. Most places, when they train people with holsters, have their own system. Some have what we call stages of the draw, 7 stages of the draw. Some have 4, some have 5. There's a variety of ways of training. This is not the only way, it is just a way, and I find it's functional for people who have to self-coach. If you don't live next door to John Wick or any of the legendary greats like Wyatt Earp or Clint Eastwood, well, then you're going to have to train on your own. And you're smart enough to do that. At least I believe everybody starts out there. Not being smart enough to do it in a safe and professional way is definitely a self-correcting mistake. Let's start with the simple basics of when you go to get your firearm out of your holster, you will have to defeat or disable any retention device if there is one. In this case, I have a holster with a flap, okay? And I have to pull it down and lift it up out of the way. If you're wearing a concealment garment, you're going to have to develop what they call the sweep to get the garment out of the way. You can do all that and figure it out. Figure out what the steps are for yourself. But the first thing you're going to do is disable the retention device. Then we're going to break it into stages of the draw. Stages of the draw, stage 1 is when you put your hand on the gun, and we call it the first and final grip. First and final grip, you will not be able to develop at this stage. First and final grip is something that you develop through shooting the firearm with live full power ammunition. You cannot develop your first and final grip with just dry training. Keep that in mind. Although we're going to continue to use that terminology in training. For those of you that have gotten that far, this is where you are, first and final grip. That is stage 1. Stage 2 then is to simply lift the gun out of the holster without putting your finger on the trigger, clearing the holster. Stage 2, okay? Gun out of the holster. Stage 3 then for me would be parallel to the range floor, like this, in the general direction of where you intend to deploy the ammunition. That make everybody safe? Here, your finger is still off the trigger. If you have a firearm equipped with a safety, it is still in the on position. Clear as mud, if you have a firearm equipped with a safety, it is still in the on position. Stage 4 is where I marry my hands together as I push the gun out and get it towards my eye level. And as it progresses there and gets in my firing zone, I can take the safety off if I am so inclined. Now, stage 5, if I've acquired my target and I'm ready to shoot, I place my finger on the trigger and I simply pull the trigger. You'll hear my gun go click. Okay? That's all there is to it. And if necessary, I'd fire another shot and another shot, depending on the training model that I'm using. But for now, I want to focus on developing the mechanical aspects of getting the gun out of the holster and then back in the holster. Now from here, to return it to the holster, I do everything in reverse, in slow motion, exactly the same. First off, as I bring the gun down, in the case of this gun, the hammer has to be cocked in order to engage the safety. I engage, you hear that? I engage the safety as I bring the gun down. I start to get my hands separated, and when I am ready, I can say, all right, nope, my finger is off the trigger long before it gets here. I can say, I need to make sure my gun is safe and capable of going in the holster. It is. Safety's on, fingers off the trigger, it's fully forward and locked in battery. I also need to make sure that my holster is safe and ready to accept the firearm. So I lift the flap, I check to make sure nothing's going to interfere with the mechanism, and as I put it in the holster, I try desperately not to point this firearm at my body, seat it all the way in slowly. Release the gun. Now if I want to, I can close the flap. Stages of the draw for me can be 5, can be 6, can be 4, depending on your chosen training model. Me personally, I prefer to use 5 when I start training other people, because it allows me to work with all types of firearms, including single action revolvers, in which case you have to cock the gun manually. It's not written in stone. The magic is understanding when it's time to put your finger on the trigger, when it's time to disengage the safety. The other magic is get it out, learn to get it out as fast as you can. Learn to put it away as slow as you can, ensuring that it's safe. That's the magic for me in my dry training and developing those structures, those mechanical devices of getting the gun from the holster out to the point where I can discharge it safely at the target and then put it back. Holstering a live loaded firearm increases the risk to you, the user. You have to have your A game on all the time when you're doing that. And that's where you can train. When you do it, I do my dry training sessions in 15-minute intervals. I'm not saying you got to do it once a week or once a month or once a day. That's totally up to you and how much time you've got to commit. For us people in the northern climates, when you get tired of shoveling snow or watching another episode of 50 Shades of Purple, then take some time, do a little dry training. Always do it safely, sanitized area, sanitize yourself, and it will pay dividends when the time comes for you to go to the range and start working on the principles of marksmanship. That's all I got for you today, and you have a nice, snowy, warm day today. Okay, so this is the addendum for you Billie Jean Hickok types. If you're going to do the cowboy action style firearm or the cowboy gun because you think you're going to end up in Jurassic Park, first thing I want you to do is disable the retention device, whether it's a strap or a string or a thumb. And then stages of the draw are no different. Stage 1, first and final grip. Stage 2, pull the gun out of the holster straight up. Stage 3, parallel to the floor. Stage 4, as I push the gun out and put it up to my eye and collect my sight picture, I cock the hammer. Stage 5, I can put my finger on the trigger and discharge ammunition. If I need to, I can cock it again and discharge ammunition. If I don't discharge the ammunition, as I bring it down, I need to consider that I have to make it safe to put it back in the holster. For me, this is the way I prefer to do it. Still pointing at an intended target, I place my thumb completely in front of the hammer, and then I simply pull the trigger, and no, it doesn't hurt. As you can see, I'm not laying on the floor screaming like a little girl, as long as my thumb is against the hammer before I pull the trigger. If I put my thumb up here and pull the trigger, it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt right away. Put your thumb right against the hammer. You don't have to put pressure on it. Just put it there gently, pull the trigger. It releases it from the sear enough, and I can get my finger off the trigger. Then I can use my thumb to lower it the rest of the way down. To whether it's a half cock notch or all the way down like a safe Ruger with the transfer bar safety, it depends on the gun you have. Now I know my gun is safe and ready to go back in the holster. I can bring it down. Then I look at my holster, make sure my holster is safe and ready to accept the firearm. Again, put it in the holster slowly. Then if necessary, at the end of the draw stroke, when you're done engaging the zombies, put your strap on. That's fairly straightforward. It's still 5 stages. It's still fairly easy to train with. Double action revolver addendum. If you were so misfortunate that in your acquisition you acquired, a Smith & Wesson or a Colt or whatever double action revolver from the First World War or from last week's Jerry Miculek version special, there isn't much change. It's still the same steps. Stages of the draw is going to be disable whatever mechanism holds the gun in the holster securely, if there is one. First and final grip. Then you're going to do stage 1, first and final grip. Stage 2, straight out of the holster. Stage 3, parallel to the range floor. Stage 4, I'm going to push the gun out and start to put my finger on the trigger. Now, if your double action revolver is set up to fire double action, then you're going to fire it double action in stage 5. Pull the trigger, it's going to cock the hammer and release the hammer. If you are that person who is of weak constitution, who feels you can only shoot well with the double action revolver in the archaic single action revolver state, even though that's not how it's really designed, you pull the hammer back and you fire it in single action mode. Just remember, if you put it in the single action mode and you need to put it back in the holster, you have to put the hammer back down. It's the same process as I use for the single action revolver. Put my thumb directly in front of the hammer so it releases from the sear, and I use my thumb to lower it down with my trigger finger off the trigger. It is now safe condition to put back in the holster. The holster is safe. Again, problem with the double action revolver is there's no other mechanical safety on it. If you feel resistance putting it in the holster, stop pushing. Okay? It's not a case of it's not working, get a bigger hammer. Okay? If you feel too much resistance, stop pushing, figure out what's wrong. Clear as mud. Last addendum. For you darlings that shopped in the gun store on the planet Nerdo Crumbesia, and you managed to get yourself a striker fired plastic, never classic semi-automatic sidearm, then this is the one for you. Here it's really nothing different. There's some extra safety concerns, but it's like this, okay? Again, if you're going to get started, disable the mechanism that retains it in the holster. In the case of this circle holster, it's a little push button. You do first and final grip, which is stage 1. Stage 2, withdraw it from the holster, straight up out of the holster. Stage 3, parallel to the floor. Stage 4, as I force it forward into my line of sight, I can put my finger down to the trigger, which is where the safety is, the trigger. Line up the sights, and I'm going to fire the mechanism. Now, the thing with striker fired guns is it's a pre-cocked striker in most of them. So when you bring it out and you go to activate it, you fire one. And then if you want to fire again, you're going to just cycle it slightly. You don't have to cycle it all the way, because if you got an empty magazine in there, it'll lock open. But just cycle it about part way and then bring it back up, and you should be able to re-engage the trigger mechanism. In the case of the Smith & Wesson variants, you have to have a magazine in order for it to discharge. So if you pull it all the way back, it's going to lock open. So you need to pull it back a little bit and then release it, and you can continue to fire. It complicates your dry firing training, so I suggest you stay on single shot mode and then get back to returning it to the holster and develop those mechanics. From here, okay, after I've fired my dry shot in training, then it's a matter of finger off the trigger. I'm going to bring it back down to here. I don't have any safeties to disengage, no hammers to decock, nothing. I just bring it down to here. I make sure the gun is in a condition where it can go in the holster. Finger is off the trigger. Is the holster ready to accept the firearm safely? Yes, it is. The extra caution here is, if you're pushing it in there and there's something that engages that trigger while you're pushing it in, just know the trigger does not care. it will discharge the firearm if there's a live round in the chamber, and the toggle on your mountain equipment co-op fleece is inside the trigger guard as you're pushing it into the holster. You feel any resistance, stop what you're doing and go back and look as to why is it not going in the holster unimpeded. Look where it's going, push it in slowly, listen for the retention click, or if you need to, the strap or whatever that holds it. That's the extra caution with striker fired firearms. That brings to the conclusion of this episode. You can start training, drawing from the holster and building the mechanics of it so it becomes second nature, working towards your Mandalorian Jedi level competencies with the firearm. It will pay dividends when you finally do get to the range. We'll talk about the fundamentals of marksmanship in follow-on episodes as we go. Start there. Have a good day.